The California vineyard stretched endlessly under September's golden light, each row of grapevines perfectly manicured for my daughter's wedding. I stood at the edge of the parking area, straightening my charcoal suit jacket for the third time, wondering why my hands wouldn't stop trembling. 24 years of fatherhood, and Victoria was about to marry someone I'd met exactly twice. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd financed this entire celebration through the divorce settlement money Elena had fought so viciously to minimize. $50,000 for flowers, catering, and a dress that cost more than my first car. But Victoria deserved perfection, even if I'd have to endure Elena's presence to witness it. I checked my phone, 3:47 p.m. The ceremony would start in 13 minutes, and I still hadn't located my assigned seat. Elena's meticulous planning had relegated me to the third row, behind her art gallery friends and Damien's investment cronies. The message was clear. I was invited, tolerated, but certainly not family. "Marcus!" A voice called across the gravel parking lot. Samuel Kane approached, his silver hair gleaming, expensive Italian leather shoes crunching with each step. My lawyer and oldest friend looked concerned. "You sure you want to do this? We could still leave." "She's my daughter, Sam. I wouldn't miss this." He studied my face with the same intensity he reserved for hostile witnesses. "Elena's going to make this difficult. You know that, right?" Before I could respond, the string quartet began playing, signaling guests to take their seats. We walked toward the ceremony area, where white chairs formed perfect rows facing an archway draped in cascading roses. The vineyard's tasting room had been transformed into something from a magazine. Elegant, expensive, and completely devoid of anything that reminded me of the little girl who used to build pillow forts in my living room. I found my assigned seat and sat down, nodding politely to the strangers surrounding me. 3 rows ahead, Elena held court with her usual collection of admirers, gallery owners, wine collectors, and social climbers who hung on her every perfectly articulated word. She wore a navy blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her auburn hair styled in an elaborate updo that screamed professional salon. The music shifted and guests rose as Victoria's bridesmaids began their procession. Each young woman looked radiant in dusty rose silk, but I barely registered their faces. My attention was fixed on the archway, waiting for my first glimpse of Victoria in her wedding dress. Then the bridal march began, and my world tilted sideways. Victoria appeared at the back of the aisle, absolutely stunning in flowing white silk and delicate lace. But walking beside her, offering his arm with practiced charm, was Damien Cross, the man who had destroyed my marriage, the man Elena had chosen over her husband of 18 years, the man who was now walking my daughter down the aisle. My vision narrowed to a tunnel. The vineyard, the guests, the music. Everything faded except the sight of Damien's hand resting possessively on Victoria's arm. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo and a smile that I recognized from countless dinner parties where he'd charmed my friends while secretly planning to steal my wife. They moved slowly down the aisle, Victoria beaming with joy, Damien playing the role of proud father figure. Guests turned to watch their approach, many dabbing their eyes with handkerchiefs. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was the final humiliation Elena had orchestrated to remind me of my place in Victoria's new life. When they reached the archway, the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" Damien's voice carried clearly across the silent vineyard. "Her mother and I do with great joy and pride." The words hit me like physical blows. Her mother and I. As if 18 years of fatherhood could be erased by 2 years of his presence in Victoria's life. I felt Sam's hand on my shoulder, steadying me as I swayed slightly in my chair. The ceremony continued around me, but I heard nothing except the blood rushing in my ears. I watched Victoria exchange vows with her fiancé, watched her laugh at something Damien whispered during the ring exchange, watched Elena beam with satisfaction from her front row seat. When the officiant pronounced them married, the crowd erupted in applause. I clapped mechanically, my hands moving without conscious thought. Victoria and her new husband kissed, then turned to face their guests with radiant smiles. As they walked back down the aisle, Victoria's eyes found mine for a brief moment. She offered a small wave, the kind you'd give a distant relative or family friend. Polite acknowledgement, nothing more. The receiving line formed near the vineyard's tasting room, and I joined the queue of well-wishers. When my turn came, Victoria hugged me briefly, her designer perfume foreign and expensive. "Dad, I'm so glad you could make it," she said, her tone warm but distant. "You look beautiful, sweetheart. Absolutely radiant." "Thank you." She glanced toward Damien, who was accepting congratulations a few feet away. This whole day has been like a fairy tale. I'm happy for you, Victoria. Truly. She squeezed my hand once, then turned to greet the next guest. The entire exchange lasted maybe 30 seconds. Elena appeared beside me as I stepped away from the receiving line. Even after 2 years of divorce proceedings and bitter custody battles, she still took my breath away. At 48, she possessed the kind of sophisticated beauty that aged like fine wine, sharper, more complex, utterly devastating. Marcus, thank you for coming. I know this meant a lot to Victoria. Of course I came. She's my daughter. Elena's smile was perfectly calibrated, warm enough to appear gracious, cool enough to maintain distance. She's lucky to have so many people who love her. The words stung because they reduced me to just another person in Victoria's life, no more important than a favorite aunt or family friend. Before I could respond, Damien appeared at Elena's side, sliding his arm around her waist with casual ownership. Marcus, good to see you, he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, confident, designed to convey dominance. Thanks for being here today. I wanted to refuse the handshake, to tell him exactly what I thought of his presence in my daughter's life. Instead, I gripped his hand and squeezed harder than necessary. Wouldn't miss it, I said evenly. Victoria's been so excited about today. We've been planning it for months. He emphasized we just enough to make his point clear. She mentioned you've been very involved, I replied, fighting to keep my voice neutral. Elena's eyes flickered with something that might have been warning or amusement. Damien's been wonderful with Victoria. He's really stepped up as a father figure. The phrase father figure hit me like a slap. I'd been Victoria's father for 24 years, not a figure or a substitute, but the real thing. I'd taught her to ride a bike, helped with homework, walked the floor with her during colic-filled nights that Elena couldn't handle. That's generous of him, I managed. Well, Elena said, glancing toward the reception area where guests were beginning to gather, we should probably join the party. The photographer wants to get some family photos before dinner. Family photos? Without me, I watched them walk away together. Elena elegant and poised, Damien confident and commanding. They looked like the perfect couple, successful and sophisticated. Exactly the kind of people who belonged at a vineyard wedding costing more than most people's annual salary. The reception was held in the vineyard's barrel room, transformed with thousands of twinkling lights and elaborate floral arrangements. Round tables draped in ivory linens filled the space, each centerpiece worth more than I'd spent on Victoria's childhood birthday parties combined. I found my assigned table in the back corner, seated with Elena's gallery assistant, a wine distributor, and several people I didn't recognize. The placement was deliberate, close enough to be included, far enough to be insignificant. During dinner, I watched Damien give a toast that brought tears to half the room. He spoke eloquently about Victoria's strength, intelligence, and beauty, about how proud he was to welcome her husband into their family. The applause was thunderous. When Elena spoke, she thanked everyone for celebrating our daughter's special day and praised Damien for being such a positive influence in Victoria's life. She didn't mention me once. I excused myself before dessert and walked outside into the cooling evening air. The vineyard was beautiful at sunset, golden light filtering through the grape leaves, but I couldn't appreciate it. All I could think about was the carefully orchestrated message Elena had sent today. I was no longer Victoria's father in any meaningful sense. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. Ready to leave? I'll drive. I was typing my response when footsteps approached on the gravel behind me. I turned to see Elena walking toward me, having shed her heels for the uneven ground. I thought I might find you out here, she said softly. Just getting some air. She stopped a few feet away, close enough to talk without being overheard, but far enough to maintain the careful distance that had defined our interactions since the divorce. Marcus, I want you to know that having Damien walk Victoria down the aisle wasn't meant to hurt you. I studied her face in the fading light. Even now, even after everything she'd put me through, part of me wanted to believe her sincerity was real. Then why did it happen that way? She sighed, wrapping her arms around herself against the evening chill. Victoria asked him to do it. She felt like he'd been more present in her life these past 2 years, especially during the wedding planning. More present? Elena, I've been her father for 24 years. I know that, and you'll always be her real father. Just not today. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Always her real father, but not today. Not when it mattered. Not when the cameras were rolling and the memories were being made. Do you have any idea what it felt like to watch another man walk my daughter down the aisle? Elena's expression softened slightly. I can imagine it was difficult. Difficult? I laughed bitterly. Elena, you orchestrated this entire thing to humiliate me. The seating arrangement, the family photos, having Damien give the father's toast, all of it was designed to show everyone that I've been replaced. That's not true, Marcus. You're being paranoid. Am I? Then why wasn't I included in any of the wedding planning? Why wasn't I consulted about the guest list or the menu or any of the 1,000 decisions that went into this day? She shifted uncomfortably. But you know how complicated things have been between us. We thought it would be easier. Easier for who? For you and Damien to play house with my daughter while I wrote the checks. Elena's composure cracked slightly. You think this is about money? You think I care about your financial contribution? I think you care about control. I think you wanted to prove that you could erase me from Victoria's life whenever you chose. Victoria loves you, Marcus. Nothing will change that. But everything else has changed, hasn't it? You've made sure of that. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Maybe regret, maybe calculation, maybe both. I should get back inside, she said finally. They'll be cutting the cake soon. She turned to leave, then paused. Marcus, I know you're angry. I understand why. But Victoria's happy. Shouldn't that be what matters most? After she left, I stood alone in the vineyard, as darkness settled over the rolling hills. Inside the barrel room, I could hear laughter and music, the sounds of celebration continuing without me. Sam was right. I should leave. There was nothing left for me here except the growing certainty that Elena had won completely. But as I walked toward the parking lot, my phone buzzed with another text. This one wasn't from Sam. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Blackwood, this is Janet Martinez from Hartwell Investigations. We met last month regarding background checks for your firm. I need to speak with you urgently about Damien Cross. Call me as soon as possible. I stopped walking and read the message again. Janet Martinez. I remembered her now, a former FBI agent who handled corporate security consulting. We'd used her services to investigate potential business partners, but I'd never asked her to look into Damien, or had I? 6 weeks ago, during one of my darker moments after learning about the wedding arrangements, I'd considered having Damien investigated. I'd even made a few phone calls, including one to Janet's firm. But I'd ultimately decided against it, telling myself it would be petty and vindictive. Apparently, Janet had decided to proceed anyway. I dialed her number immediately. Mr. Blackwood, thank God you called. We need to meet tomorrow morning. I've uncovered something about Damien Cross that you need to see immediately. What kind of something? Not over the phone. Can you meet me at your office at 8 a.m.? And Marcus, bring your lawyer. The line went dead, leaving me standing in the parking lot with my heart hammering against my ribs. Whatever Janet had discovered, it was serious enough to risk calling me during my daughter's wedding reception. I looked back toward the barrel room, where warm light spilled from the windows and shadows moved in celebration. Elena and Damien were in there somewhere, basking in their triumph, completely unaware that their carefully constructed world might be about to collapse. For the first time in months, I smiled. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood as I sat in my downtown office waiting for Janet Martinez. Sam paced behind my desk, his usual courtroom composure replaced by barely contained anxiety. You realize this could be nothing, he said, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Private investigators sometimes oversell their findings to justify their fees. Janet doesn't work that way. She's FBI trained, not some strip mall detective looking for easy money. Still, we should manage our expectations. Even if Damien has some minor financial irregularities, it probably won't change anything with Victoria. I turned to face him. Sam, what if it's not minor? What if it's something that could actually matter? Before he could answer, my assistant knocked and announced Janet's arrival. She entered carrying a thick manila folder and a laptop case, her expression grim enough to silence Sam's pacing. Janet Martinez was in her early 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of direct gaze that made guilty people confess without being asked. She'd spent 20 years with the Bureau's Financial Crimes Division before starting her own consulting firm. Gentlemen, thank you for meeting on short notice. What I'm about to show you is going to be disturbing. She opened her laptop and connected it to my office's presentation screen. Financial documents filled the display. Bank statements, wire transfers, investment records. I started looking into Damien Cross 6 weeks ago when your assistant mentioned you were considering a background check. Even though you never formally hired me, I continued the investigation because I found irregularities that concerned me. The first document showed Damien's hedge fund, Cross Capital Management. On the surface, it appeared successful. Steady returns, satisfied investors, all the hallmarks of a legitimate operation. Cross Capital manages approximately $400 million in assets, Janet continued, including several high-profile clients and institutional investors. But look at this. She clicked to the next screen, showing detailed transaction records. Damien has been running what's essentially a sophisticated Ponzi scheme for the past 3 years. He's using new investor money to pay returns to existing clients while siphoning off millions for personal use. Sam leaned forward, studying the numbers. How much are we talking about? Conservative estimate? He's stolen at least $25 million. But here's where it gets personal for you, Marcus. The next document made my blood run cold. It was a trust fund statement. Victoria's trust fund, established when she turned 18 with money from her grandfather's estate. Damien convinced Elena to consolidate Victoria's trust assets under his management 18 months ago. The original balance was $1.2 million. Current balance is $87,000. The room spun slightly. He stole over $1 million from my daughter? It gets worse. He used Elena's power of attorney to access the funds, claiming they were being moved to higher-yield investments. In reality, he was using Victoria's money to cover shortfalls in his hedge fund. Janet pulled up another document. He's also been manipulating Elena's gallery finances. She took out a business loan secured by the gallery property to invest with Damien. When that money disappeared into his scheme, she mortgaged her personal residence to keep the gallery afloat. I stared at the evidence spread across my screen, trying to process the magnitude of Damien's betrayal. He hadn't just stolen money. He'd systematically destroyed both Elena's and Victoria's financial security while playing the role of devoted stepfather. How long before this collapses? Sam asked. Soon. The SEC has been investigating Cross Capital for 3 months. They're planning raids next week. When that happens, everything will come out. The missing money, the falsified statements, all of it. I stood and walked to my office window, looking down at the busy street below. People hurried past on their way to jobs and meetings, completely unaware that their lives could be destroyed by someone they trusted. Does Elena know? I asked without turning around. I don't think so. Damien's been very careful to keep her isolated from the financial details. She believes her investments are performing well because he's been showing her fabricated statements. Sam cleared his throat. Marcus, you understand what this means? When the SEC raids happen, Elena and Victoria will lose everything. Elena's gallery, her house, Victoria's trust fund, all of it will be frozen as part of the investigation. I turned back to face them. And there's nothing we can do to stop it? Janet shook her head. The federal investigation is too far advanced, but there might be ways to minimize the damage to your daughter, such as if someone were to file a civil lawsuit immediately before the SEC freezes the assets, it might be possible to recover some of Victoria's money. The key would be acting fast before Damien realizes we know about his scheme. Sam was already reaching for his phone. I can have papers filed by this afternoon. Fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, theft. We'll throw everything at him. Wait, I said, holding up my hand. Before we do anything, I need to think about this. Janet looked surprised. Marcus, every day we wait is another day he could move money offshore or destroy evidence. I understand that. But I need to consider the impact on Victoria. She just got married. She's happy. If we expose this now, it will destroy her world. Her world is already destroyed, Sam said bluntly. She just doesn't know it yet. At least this way we might be able to save something. I walked back to my desk and sat down heavily. Show me everything, every document, every transaction, every lie he's told. I want to understand the full scope of this before I decide what to do. For the next 2 hours, Janet walked us through Damien's elaborate scheme. It was brilliantly constructed and absolutely devastating. He'd exploited Elena's trust, Victoria's inexperience, and the financial complexity that most people couldn't navigate. The most damaging revelation came near the end of Janet's presentation. She pulled up a series of emails between Damien and his business partner, discussing their strategy for managing the wife situation. In one particularly vile exchange, Damien wrote, "Elena's completely under control. She believes everything I tell her about the investments. The daughter's trust fund should cover our shortfall for another 6 months, maybe longer if we're careful." His partner responded, "What about the ex-husband? He's got money and might start asking questions." Damien's reply, "Not a problem. Elena's turned the daughter against him completely. He's isolated and irrelevant. By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll be in the Cayman Islands. I stared at those words until they burned into my vision. Isolated and irrelevant. That's how Damien saw me. Not as a threat, but as a pathetic figure he could dismiss without concern. I've seen enough, I said finally. Janet closed her laptop. What's your decision? I looked at Sam, then back at Janet. File everything. Sue him for every penny he's stolen. I want his life destroyed as completely as he destroyed theirs. And Elena? She's going to be devastated when this comes out. I thought about Elena's words at the wedding. You'll always be her real father, just not today. About how she'd orchestrated my humiliation while trusting the man who was systematically stealing from our daughter. Elena made her choice, I said. She chose to trust a stranger over the father of her child. She chose to exclude me from Victoria's life while giving Damien complete access to her finances. Now she can live with the consequences. Sam was already drafting legal documents on his laptop. This is going to be ugly, Marcus. When we file suit, the media will pick it up. Elena's gallery has a high profile in the art world, and Damien manages money for some prominent people. This will be front-page news. Good. Let everyone see what kind of man Elena chose over her husband. Janet packed her files. I'll need a formal retainer agreement to continue investigating. There might be more assets we can recover if we move quickly. Done. Whatever it takes. After they left, I sat alone in my office, staring at the city beyond my windows. 6 hours ago, I'd been a divorced father trying to accept his diminished role in his daughter's life. Now I was about to become the instrument of destruction for everyone who had betrayed me. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Dad, thank you again for coming to the wedding. It meant a lot to have you there. Love you. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Love you too, sweetheart. Always. By Thursday, Sam had filed a comprehensive lawsuit against Damien Cross and Cross Capital Management. The complaint detailed extensive fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and theft of trust assets totaling over $1 million. We'd asked for immediate asset seizure and punitive damages that would bankrupt Damien, even if he somehow avoided criminal prosecution. Janet's investigation had uncovered additional evidence, including offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland where Damien had been moving stolen funds. The total scope of his theft was approaching $40 million, with Victoria's trust fund representing just a fraction of his sufferers. On Friday morning, FBI agents raided Cross Capital's offices in downtown San Francisco. The story broke on the financial news networks within hours. Prominent hedge fund manager arrested in massive Ponzi scheme. My phone started ringing immediately. Reporters wanted comments about the lawsuit. Business associates asked if I'd been affected. Friends who remembered Damien from my marriage to Elena called with shocked reactions. I ignored them all and waited. The call I was expecting came Friday evening while I was reviewing Janet's latest report. Elena's name appeared on my phone screen, and I let it ring 4 times before answering. Marcus, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Her voice was different, shaky, desperate, completely stripped of the confident control she'd maintained since our divorce. Hello, Elena. Marcus, I need help. The FBI came to the gallery today. They're saying Damien stole money from clients, including Victoria's trust fund. They're freezing everything. My accounts, the gallery, even my house. I don't understand what's happening. I set down Janet's report and walked to my office window. The city lights sparkled below, each one representing someone going about their normal life, unaware of the drama unfolding in mine. I'm sorry to hear about your troubles. My troubles? Her voice cracked. Marcus, they're saying he stole over $1 million from Victoria. Her college fund, her trust money, everything her grandfather left her is gone. That must be devastating for you. Devastating? It's impossible. Damien would never steal from Victoria. He loves her like his own daughter. I couldn't help laughing. Elena! He's been using Victoria's money to prop up his Ponzi scheme for over a year. The FBI has records of every transaction. There was silence on the line. Then quietly, how do you know that? Because I'm the one who exposed him. Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. What? I hired investigators, Elena. I've known about Damien's scheme for weeks. I'm the one who filed the lawsuit that started this whole investigation. You did this? You destroyed my life for revenge? I saved Victoria's life. Or what was left of it after you let a criminal manage her finances. Marcus, please, whatever anger you have toward me, Don't take it out on Victoria. She's innocent in all this. You're right, Victoria is innocent. That's why I'm going to make sure she recovers every penny Damien stole from her, even if it costs you everything you have. Elena's breathing became ragged. The gallery, my house, everything I've worked for. Should have thought about that before you chose a thief over your daughter's father. I didn't know. You have to believe me, I had no idea what he was doing. I don't have to believe anything, Elena. You made your choice at Victoria's wedding when you told me I'd always be her real father, just not when it mattered. Well, congratulations. Now I'm the only one who can save her from the mess you created. Marcus, I'm begging you. Don't let your hatred for me destroy Victoria's future. I'm not destroying anything. I'm fixing what you broke. I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside my window, the city continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to the human dramas playing out in office buildings and homes across its sprawling landscape. For the first time since Victoria's wedding, I felt something approaching peace, not happiness. The damage was too extensive for that, but a cold satisfaction that justice was finally being served. Elena had orchestrated my humiliation with surgical precision, turning my own daughter against me while trusting her future to a criminal. Now she would learn what it felt like to lose everything that mattered. And I was just getting started. Saturday morning brought the first newspaper coverage, and it was even more damaging than I'd hoped. The San Francisco Chronicle's front page featured a photo of Damien in handcuffs, alongside the headline, "Gallery Owner's Boyfriend, Charged in $40 million Fraud." The article detailed not only Damien's Ponzi scheme, but also his personal relationship with Elena Blackwood, owner of the prestigious Meridian Gallery. It mentioned Victoria's stolen trust fund and Elena's business loans that had disappeared into Damien's operation. By noon, the art world gossip blogs had picked up the story. Elena's gallery, which had built its reputation on discretion and exclusivity, was now the subject of salacious speculation about financial impropriety and romantic manipulation. I was reading the coverage in my home office when Sam called with an update. "The federal prosecutor wants to meet with you Monday morning. They're considering additional charges against Damien based on your daughter's case." "What kind of charges?" "Elder misuse, for one. Even though Victoria's young, using someone's trust fund for personal gain carries serious penalties. They're also looking at tax evasion and money laundering." "Good. I want him destroyed completely." "Marcus, there's something else. Elena's attorney called this morning. She wants to meet." I leaned back in my chair. "What for?" "She's claiming Elena was deceived just like everyone else. They want to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for immunity from prosecution." "Absolutely not. Elena enabled this by giving Damien access to Victoria's money. She bears responsibility for what happened. Her attorney says she can provide evidence that would help recover additional assets. She knows where Damien kept records that the FBI hasn't found yet." I considered this. "What kind of evidence?" "Banking information, offshore account numbers, communication with his accomplices. Apparently, Elena was more involved in his business than she initially admitted." "Set up the meeting. But I want guarantees that anything she provides will be used to maximize Damien's sentence, not reduce hers." Sunday passed quietly, giving me time to plan my strategy for the coming week. Janet had provided additional documentation showing that Damien's scheme was even more extensive than initially believed. He'd been running fraudulent operations for nearly 5 years, stealing from dozens of investors to fund an increasingly lavish lifestyle. The most infuriating detail was how he'd used my daughter's money specifically. Rather than simply mixing it with other stolen funds, he'd used Victoria's trust assets to purchase a yacht and a vacation home in Cabo San Lucas, assets he'd been enjoying while playing the devoted stepfather at family dinners and holiday celebrations. Monday morning, I arrived at the federal building for my meeting with prosecutor Amanda Chen. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she'd built her career on high-profile convictions. "Mr. Blackwood, thank you for coming in. Your civil lawsuit provided crucial evidence for our criminal case. I'm glad it was helpful. I want to see Damien Cross prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." She opened a thick file folder. "He's currently facing 47 federal charges, including wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. Based on the evidence, he's looking at 20 to 30 years in prison." "What about asset recovery?" "My daughter lost everything her grandfather left her. We've frozen approximately $15 million in domestic accounts and are working with international authorities to recover offshore funds. But I need to warn you, These cases can drag on for years, and sufferers often recover only a fraction of their losses. The thought of Victoria struggling financially while Damien's assets sat frozen in legal limbo was intolerable. What if we could expedite the recovery process? How do you mean? Elena Blackwood has information about additional assets. If she cooperates fully, could that speed up the timeline? Amanda Chen studied me carefully. Possibly. But any cooperation agreement would have to include immunity provisions. We'd need to be certain she wasn't complicit in the fraud. She wasn't complicit. She was incompetent. There's a difference. Walk me through her involvement. I spent the next hour detailing Elena's financial decisions, how she'd consolidated Victoria's trust under Damien's management, signed over power of attorney, and used her gallery and personal assets as collateral for investments in his fund. It sounds like she was manipulated, Amanda concluded. She was, but her decisions still cost my daughter over $1 million. I want her to face consequences for that, even if she avoids criminal charges. The civil lawsuit you filed will hold her accountable financially. If we can prove she had legal authority over your daughter's trust, she could be liable for the full amount. This was better than I'd hoped. Even if Elena avoided prison, the civil judgment would bankrupt her completely. When can we meet with her? This afternoon, if she's willing. Her attorney says she's desperate to cooperate. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Amanda Chen's office. I arrived early and waited in the conference room, watching through the windows as Elena and her attorney approached the building. She looked terrible. The confident, sophisticated woman who had humiliated me at Victoria's wedding was gone, replaced by someone who appeared 10 years older and 20 pounds thinner. Her usually perfect hair hung limp around her shoulders, and her expensive clothes couldn't hide the hollow exhaustion in her eyes. When she entered the conference room, she avoided my gaze entirely. Her attorney, David Walsh, was a criminal defense specialist I recognized from high-profile white-collar cases. "Thank you all for meeting," Amanda began. "Miss Blackwood, you understand this conversation is being recorded and anything you say can be used in the prosecution of Damien Cross?" Elena nodded without speaking. "Tell us about your financial relationship with Mr. Cross." For the next 2 hours, Elena detailed her involvement with Damien's operation. The story that emerged was even more damaging than I'd imagined. Damien hadn't just stolen money. He'd systematically isolated Elena from anyone who might question his financial advice. He'd convinced her to fire her longtime accountant, switch banks, and avoid discussing investments with friends or family. "He said Marcus would try to sabotage our investments out of jealousy," Elena explained, her voice barely audible. "He made me promise not to discuss financial matters with anyone else." Amanda took detailed notes as Elena described Damien's manipulation tactics. "Did he ever ask you to sign documents you didn't understand?" "Constantly. He said the paperwork was just routine regulatory filings, that I didn't need to worry about the details." Elena's hands trembled as she reached for a tissue. I trusted him completely. He was so knowledgeable, so confident about everything. "What about your daughter's trust fund? How did that come under his management?" Elena glanced at me for the first time since entering the room. Victoria was struggling with her student loans, and her trust was earning almost nothing in a basic savings account. Damien said he could triple her returns within 2 years. "Did you consult with anyone before making that decision?" Amanda asked. "I should have talked to Marcus," Elena's voice cracked. "But Damien convinced me that Marcus would try to block any changes out of spite. He said we needed to act quickly to take advantage of market conditions." I felt a familiar surge of anger. Even now, Elena was portraying herself as a sufferer rather than acknowledging her role in excluding me from decisions affecting our daughter's future. "Miss Blackwood," I said, speaking for the first time since the meeting began, "did it ever occur to you to get a second opinion about moving Victoria's money? To consult with an independent financial advisor?" Elena flinched. Damien said that would delay everything, that we might miss the opportunity. "Did it occur to you to ask Victoria what she wanted? She was 22 years old enough to have input about her own trust fund." "Marcus, please," David Walsh interrupted. "We're here to cooperate with the federal investigation, not to relitigate family disputes." Amanda Chen held up her hand. "Actually, these questions are relevant. Miss Blackwood, did your daughter consent to transferring her trust assets?" Elena's composure finally cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to speak. I thought I was doing what was best for her. Damien showed me projections, success stories from other clients. I believed I was securing her future. By excluding her father from the decision? Damien said, he said that involving Marcus would create legal complications because of the divorce settlement, that it was cleaner if I handled everything as her mother. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Legal complications? Elena, I'm Victoria's father. I had every right to be consulted about her trust fund. You're right, she whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. The apology hung in the air like a challenge. Part of me had waited 2 years to hear those words, but now they felt empty, meaningless. Sorry wouldn't restore Victoria's trust fund or repair the relationship Elena had poisoned. Your apology doesn't change anything, I said. Victoria lost over $1 million because you chose to trust a criminal over her father. Amanda Chen intervened before the conversation could deteriorate further. Miss Blackwood, we need specific information about Mr. Cross's financial operations, account numbers, passwords, location of records, anything that can help us recover stolen assets. Elena reached into her purse and withdrew a small notebook. I wrote down everything I could remember: bank routing numbers, investment account details, even the combination to his safe. She slid the notebook across the table. There's a storage unit in Marin County where he kept additional records. Unit 247 at Bayside Storage. He thought I didn't know about it, but I followed him there once when I was suspicious about some discrepancies. Amanda flipped through the notebook, her eyebrows rising. This is extensive. Why didn't you mention the storage unit to the FBI? I was scared. Damien always said that if his business was ever investigated, anyone connected to it would be prosecuted too. He made me believe I was already complicit just by being involved with him. Miss Blackwood, Amanda said carefully, based on what you've told us, it appears you were a sufferer of Mr. Cross's manipulation rather than a willing participant in his fraud. However, your authority over your daughter's trust fund creates potential civil liability. Elena looked confused. What does that mean? David Walsh leaned forward. It means the federal government won't prosecute you criminally, but you could still face significant financial penalties in the civil lawsuit Mr. Blackwood filed. How significant? Elena asked. I answered before Walsh could speak. Everything, Elena. Your gallery, your house, your personal assets, all of it will be seized to compensate Victoria for what you lost. Elena stared at me in shock. But I didn't know what Damien was doing. I was deceived just like everyone else. You were deceived because you chose to exclude me from decisions about our daughter's money. You created the conditions that made Damien's theft possible. Amanda Chen gathered her notes. Miss Blackwood, the information you've provided will be very helpful in our prosecution of Mr. Cross. In exchange for your continued cooperation, the federal government will not pursue criminal charges against you. What about the civil case? Elena asked desperately. That's between you and Mr. Blackwood. Elena turned to me, her eyes pleading. Marcus, please. I know I made terrible mistakes, but I'm losing everything. The gallery that took me 20 years to build, the house where Victoria grew up, it's all going to be taken away. Good, I said simply. Maybe that will teach you to think twice before trusting strangers with your family's future. Elena's face went white. You really hate me that much? I don't hate you, Elena. I'm just done protecting you from the consequences of your choices. David Walsh tried one more approach. Mr. Blackwood, if Miss Blackwood loses her assets, she'll have no way to contribute to your daughter's financial recovery. Wouldn't it be better to reach some kind of settlement that preserves her ability to help? I considered this. Elena's gallery was worth several $1 million, and her house was valuable real estate in an expensive market. If properly managed, those assets could significantly accelerate Victoria's financial recovery. I'll consider a structured settlement, I said finally, but only if Elena agrees to certain conditions. What conditions? Walsh asked. First, she signs over full control of Victoria's remaining trust assets to me. No more maternal authority over financial decisions. Elena nodded quickly. Of course. Second, she provides a full accounting of every financial decision she made regarding Victoria's money, including detailed records of all communications with Damien. I can do that. Third, she publicly acknowledges her role in enabling Damien's theft. I want a written statement admitting that her decision to exclude me from financial planning directly contributed to Victoria's losses. Elena hesitated. Marcus, that could affect my reputation in the art world. Clients need to trust my judgment. Your reputation is already destroyed, I interrupted. The question is whether you want to help your daughter or continue protecting yourself. She looked at David Walsh, who shrugged helplessly. It's your choice, Elena. Fine, she whispered. I'll sign whatever you want. And fourth, I continued, you transfer ownership of your gallery to a trust fund for Victoria's benefit. The business will continue operating, but all profits will go toward restoring her financial security. This last demand clearly shocked Elena. The gallery was her life's work, her identity, her primary source of income and social status. Marcus, please, anything but the gallery. I'll give you the house, my personal assets, whatever you want. But the gallery is all I have left. The gallery is worth more than Victoria's stolen trust fund. It's the most valuable asset you have, which makes it the most appropriate source of compensation. Elena buried her face in her hands. You're destroying my entire life. I'm prioritizing our daughter's life over yours. Something you apparently couldn't do. Amanda Chen closed her files. I think we have enough information to proceed with the federal case. Miss Blackwood, we'll need you to accompany agents to the storage unit tomorrow morning. After that, you can work out the civil settlement details with your respective attorneys. As the meeting broke up, Elena approached me one last time. Marcus, I know you'll never forgive me for what happened, but please remember that Victoria loves you. Don't let your anger toward me damage your relationship with her. My relationship with Victoria was damaged when you convinced her that Damien was more important than her father. I'm just repairing that damage the only way you left me, by proving that I'm the parent she can actually depend on. Elena had no response to that. She gathered her things and left with David Walsh, her shoulders bowed with defeat. Amanda Chen walked me to the elevator. That was brutal but effective. The information she provided will probably double our asset recovery. How long before Damien goes to trial? 6 months, maybe longer if he fights extradition from wherever he tries to run. But with the evidence we have now, conviction is virtually guaranteed. As I drove home that evening, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. Elena's cooperation would help restore Victoria's financial security, but it wouldn't repair the relationship damage that had been done. My daughter was still married, still convinced that Damien had been a positive influence in her life, still unaware that her father had been the one to save her from financial ruin. The next phase of my plan would be the most delicate, revealing the truth to Victoria without destroying her completely. Tuesday morning brought news that Damien had been arrested trying to board a private flight to Switzerland. Federal agents found him at a small airfield in Napa County with 2 suitcases full of cash and a fake passport. The arrest made national news, with footage of Damien in handcuffs being broadcast on every major network. I was watching the coverage in my office when Victoria called. Dad, have you seen the news about Damien? Her voice sounded hollow, shocked. This was the first time we'd spoken since her wedding, and I could hear the confusion in every word. Yes, I saw it. How are you holding up? I don't understand what's happening. The news is saying he stole millions of dollars, that he was running some kind of scam, but that's impossible. Damien would never. Victoria, where are you right now? At home. Derek's at work, and I've been watching the news all morning. They're saying Mom lost the gallery, that my trust fund is gone. None of it makes sense. I made a decision that would change everything between us. Victoria, I need to see you. Can you meet me for lunch? Yes. I think I need to talk to someone who understands what's really happening. We met at a quiet restaurant in Marin County, far from the media circus surrounding Elena's gallery. Victoria looked fragile, her usual confidence replaced by uncertainty and fear. Dad, please tell me this is all some kind of mistake. I reached across the table and took her hand. I wish I could, sweetheart, but it's all true. Damien stole over $40 million from his clients, including the money your grandfather left you. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. But he was so good to me. He helped plan my wedding. He walked me down the aisle. How could someone who seemed to care about me steal from me? This was the moment I'd been dreading. Victoria's entire perception of the last 2 years was built on lies, and destroying those illusions would be painful for both of us. Victoria, there's something else you need to know. I'm the one who exposed Damien's crimes. She stared at me in confusion. What do you mean? I hired investigators to look into his background. When they discovered the fraud, I filed a lawsuit and contacted the FBI. Everything that's happening now started because I uncovered the truth about what he was doing to your money. Victoria pulled her hand away from mine. You investigated Damien behind Mom's back. Behind everyone's back. I suspected something was wrong, and I was right. How long have you known? About his crimes? A few weeks? But I've been suspicious of him since before your wedding. Victoria's expression hardened. Is that why you look so angry at the ceremony? Because you were planning to destroy him? I was angry because I watched another man walk my daughter down the aisle while I sat in the back row like a distant relative. Dad, I explained that. Damien had been more involved in my life recently because your mother deliberately excluded me from wedding planning while giving him complete access to your finances. Victoria fell silent, processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice was small and hurt. So everything was fake? Damien's kindness, his support, all of it was just part of some scheme to steal my money? I think he genuinely cared about you, Victoria. But he also saw you as a source of funds to keep his fraud running. Those aren't mutually exclusive. And Mom, did she know? This was the hardest question to answer honestly. Your mother was manipulated, just like you were, but she also made decisions that put you at risk because she was more interested in excluding me than protecting you. Victoria stared at her untouched salad. I feel so stupid. I actually believed he cared about me like a father. You're not stupid. You trusted someone your mother trusted. That's completely understandable. But you saw through him. I was looking for problems because I was jealous and angry. That gave me a different perspective. Victoria looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry I let them push you aside. I should have included you in wedding planning, should have asked your opinion about financial decisions. I let Mom convince me that it was easier to keep you separate from everything. Victoria, you don't need to apologize. You were caught in the middle of something that wasn't your fault. But I chose sides. I chose them over you, and now I find out they were lying about everything. I moved my chair closer to hers. What matters now is that we figure out how to move forward. Your trust fund money can be recovered, but it's going to take time and legal action. How much time? Months, maybe years. But I'm going to make sure you get back every penny that was stolen, plus damages for what you've been put through. Victoria wiped her eyes with her napkin. What about Mom? Is she going to prison? No. She's cooperating with the investigation, and the federal prosecutor believes she was a sufferer rather than an accomplice. But she's losing everything anyway. Yes, the gallery, her house, most of her personal assets will be used to compensate you and the other sufferers. Victoria absorbed this silently. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but sad. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Of course. Are you doing this to punish Mom or to help me? The question cut straight to the heart of my motivations. Was this about justice for Victoria or revenge against Elena? The honest answer was probably both. I'm doing this because you're my daughter, and no one should be allowed to steal from you without consequences. If that punishes your mother for the choices she made, then that's justice, not revenge. Victoria nodded slowly. I understand. I think I'm glad you're fighting for me, even if it's complicated. It's not complicated for me, Victoria. You're my daughter. I'll always fight for you. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I love you, Dad. I'm sorry it took a crisis for me to remember that. For the first time in months, I felt like I had my daughter back. We spent the rest of lunch discussing practical matters. Her marriage, her job, the financial implications of Damien's arrest. Victoria was handling the shock better than I'd expected, but I could see the anger building beneath her composed exterior. What happens to Damien now? She asked as we prepared to leave. He'll go to trial, probably be convicted, and spend the next 20 to 30 years in federal prison. Good, she said with surprising vehemence. I hope he rots in there. Victoria, no, Dad. He played games with my life, with my money, with my family. He deserves whatever happens to him. As we walked to our cars, Victoria stopped and turned to me. There's something else I need to tell you. Derek and I are having problems. What kind of problems? Money problems, mostly. We bought the house assuming my trust fund would help with the mortgage. Now that's gone, and Derek's salary alone isn't enough. We're going to have to sell and find something smaller. I felt a surge of protective anger. Even Victoria's marriage was being damaged by Damien's theft. Victoria, I can help with the mortgage until we recover your money. Dad, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. You shouldn't have to lose your home because of what Damien did. Victoria hugged me tightly. Thank you. For everything. For seeing through his lies, for fighting to get my money back, for still being my father, even when I didn't act like your daughter. You never stopped being my daughter, Victoria. Not for a single day. That evening, I called Sam with an update on my conversation with Victoria. How did she take the news about your investigation? Better than I expected. She's angry at Damien and Elena, but she understands why I did what I did. And the civil settlement with Elena? I'm ready to finalize it. Elena transfers the gallery to Victoria's trust, provides full financial disclosure, and admits responsibility for enabling the fraud. In exchange, she keeps her house and avoids complete bankruptcy. That's generous considering the circumstances. It's practical. Victoria needs her mother to remain functional, even if their relationship is damaged. Destroying Elena completely would hurt Victoria more than it would help her. What about Damien? Any word on when he'll be arraigned? Thursday morning. Amanda Chen wants me there to represent Victoria's interests as a sufferer. I'll come with you. This is going to be a media circus, and you should have legal representation. Wednesday passed quietly, giving me time to prepare for Damien's court appearance. Janet Martinez had provided additional evidence that would be presented to the judge, including records from the Cayman Islands showing where Damien had hidden nearly $10 million in stolen funds. The most damaging evidence was a recording Janet had obtained of Damien bragging to his business partner about how easy it had been to manipulate Elena and Victoria. In the recording, he described Elena as desperate for male approval and Victoria as too trusting for her own good. Listening to that recording, I felt a cold fury that surpassed anything I'd experienced during the divorce. Damien hadn't just stolen money. He'd cynically exploited the emotional vulnerabilities of my family for personal gain. Thursday morning, I arrived at the federal courthouse to find news crews lining the street. Damien's arrest had become a major story, particularly because of his high-profile clients and his relationship with Elena's gallery. Inside the courtroom, I was surprised to see Elena sitting in the back row. She looked haggard but determined, clutching a folder that probably contained the cooperation materials she'd promised Amanda Chen. Victoria entered just before the proceedings began, accompanied by Derek. She'd insisted on attending despite my suggestion that she might want to avoid the media attention. "I need to see him," she'd said. "I need to look at the man who stole from me and understand how I could have been so wrong about him." When Damien was brought into the courtroom in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit, the transformation was startling. The confident, charming man who had walked Victoria down the aisle was gone, replaced by someone who looked desperate and defeated. The arraignment was brief but devastating. Amanda Chen read 47 federal charges, each carrying potential sentences that could total over 3 centuries in prison. Damien's attorney entered a plea of not guilty, but even he looked skeptical about their chances. During the bail hearing, Amanda Chen presented evidence that Damien was a flight risk, who had attempted to flee the country with falsified documents and substantial cash assets. Your Honor, the defendant was arrested at a private airfield with over $200,000 in cash and a fake passport. He clearly has the means and motivation to flee prosecution. Damien's attorney argued that his client had strong ties to the community and would surrender his passport, but the judge was unmoved. Given the severity of the charges and the defendant's demonstrated intent to flee, bail is denied. Mr. Cross will remain in federal custody pending trial. As Damien was led away, he turned and scanned the courtroom. His eyes found Elena first, and I saw something that might have been remorse flicker across his face. Then his gaze moved to Victoria, and his expression hardened into something like defiance. Victoria stared back at him unflinchingly. When he finally looked away, she stood and walked out of the courtroom without a word. Outside the courthouse, we were ambushed by reporters shouting questions about the case. Victoria handled herself with surprising poise, offering a brief statement that she was grateful for the FBI's investigation and looked forward to seeing justice done. Elena emerged from the courthouse a few minutes later and was immediately surrounded by cameras. I watched from across the street as she struggled to answer questions about her relationship with Damien and the status of her gallery. "Miss Blackwood, did you know about Mr. Cross's fraudulent activities? Were you aware that your daughter's trust fund was being stolen? Will you be able to keep your gallery open?" Elena's responses were barely audible, but I could see her composure cracking under the pressure. Finally, David Walsh pushed through the crowd and escorted her to a waiting car. As they drove away, Victoria appeared beside me. "She looks terrible," Victoria said quietly. "She should. Her decisions enabled this entire disaster." "I know, but she's still my mother. It's hard to watch her being destroyed, even if she brought it on herself." I put my arm around Victoria's shoulders. Your mother will survive this. She's stronger than she looks, and the settlement we're negotiating will leave her with enough to rebuild her life. What about rebuilding our family? Is that even possible after everything that's happened? It was a fair question. The events of the past month had exposed fractures in our family that went far beyond Damien's financial crimes. Trust had been broken, relationships had been damaged, and some wounds might never fully heal. I don't know, I said honestly, but I'm willing to try if you are. Victoria leaned against me, and for a moment we were just a father and daughter standing together against the world's chaos. I love you, Dad. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that I love you too, sweetheart, always. 6 months later, I stood in Victoria's new home, a modest but beautiful house she'd been able to afford after the first wave of asset recovery from Damien's case. The federal investigation had been remarkably successful, recovering nearly $30 million in stolen funds from offshore accounts and seized assets. Victoria's trust fund had been completely restored, plus substantial punitive damages that left her more financially secure than she'd ever been. The irony wasn't lost on me that Damien's theft had ultimately made my daughter wealthier than her grandfather's original bequest would have provided. Elena had honored the settlement agreement, transferring ownership of the Meridian Gallery to Victoria's trust while retaining management responsibilities. The arrangement allowed Elena to maintain her professional identity while ensuring that the gallery's profits would benefit Victoria for years to come. The gallery had actually thrived under the new structure. The media attention from Damien's case had brought unexpected publicity, and several high-profile artists had requested representation specifically because of the gallery's integrity and transparency in handling the crisis. Elena had also kept her house, though she'd been forced to take a substantial mortgage to pay for her legal fees and other settlement costs. The proud, sophisticated woman who had orchestrated my humiliation at Victoria's wedding was now living paycheck to paycheck, dependent on her daughter's generosity for financial security. Justice, I reflected, took many forms. Damien's trial had lasted 3 weeks and ended with convictions on all 47 charges. He'd been sentenced to 45 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. At age 45, he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The most satisfying moment had come during sufferer impact statements, when Victoria addressed the court about how Damien's betrayal had affected her family. The defendant didn't just steal money, she'd said, her voice steady and strong. He stole trust. He manipulated my mother's emotions and my own inexperience to gain access to assets that represented my grandfather's love and my father's planning for my future. He turned my family against each other and nearly destroyed relationships that took decades to build. Damien had shown no emotion during her statement, staring straight ahead as if Victoria's words couldn't touch him. But I'd seen his hands shaking slightly, and I knew her words had found their mark. Now, as I watched Victoria hosting a dinner party for friends and family, I marveled at how much had changed. Derek had proven himself during the crisis, supporting Victoria emotionally while working extra hours to help with their expenses before the asset recovery came through. Their marriage had actually strengthened under pressure. Elena arrived fashionably late, carrying flowers and wearing a dress that was elegant, but noticeably less expensive than her previous wardrobe. The relationship between mother and daughter remained complicated, loving but guarded with an undercurrent of hurt that might never fully heal. "Marcus," Elena said, approaching me in Victoria's kitchen. "Thank you for inviting me tonight." "Victoria invited you. This is her home." Elena nodded, accepting the reminder of how power dynamics had shifted. "I wanted to thank you again for the settlement terms. They were more generous than I deserved. They were designed to benefit Victoria, not you." "I understand that, but they also kept me from losing everything, and I'm grateful." We stood in awkward silence for a moment. Two people who had once loved each other deeply, but now could barely manage polite conversation. "Elena, I need you to understand something. I didn't expose Damien to hurt you. I did it to protect Victoria. I know that now. I also know that if I'd listened to you from the beginning, none of this would have happened." "No, it wouldn't have." Elena looked toward the dining room, where Victoria was laughing at something Derek had said. "She's happy. That's all I ever wanted for her." "Then maybe we can both focus on that going forward." Elena nodded and moved toward the dining room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The anger that had driven me for months was gone, replaced by something more complex, not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of peaceful resolution. During dinner, Victoria stood to make a toast. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight and for supporting our family through a very difficult time. 6 months ago, I thought my world was falling apart. I learned that someone I trusted had betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. She paused, looking around the table at the faces of people who had proven their loyalty when it mattered most. But I also learned that the people who really love you will fight for you, even when you don't know you need fighting for. Dad, thank you for seeing through lies I couldn't see, for protecting assets I didn't know were threatened, and for never giving up on our relationship even when I made that difficult. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back. You never needed protecting from me, Victoria. You're my daughter. That's what fathers do. And Mom, Victoria continued, her voice gentler but still careful. Thank you for cooperating with the investigation, even though it cost you personally. I know you were deceived too, and I'm grateful that you chose helping me over protecting yourself. Elena wiped her eyes discreetly. I should have protected you from the beginning. I'm sorry it took a crisis for me to remember that my first loyalty should always be to you. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Victoria walked me to my car. Dad, I have something to tell you. Derek and I are trying to have a baby. The news hit me with unexpected emotional force. Victoria, that's wonderful. I wanted you to know because when we do have children, I want them to know their grandfather. I want them to understand that family loyalty matters, that you fight for the people you love even when it's difficult. I'd be honored to be their grandfather. Victoria hugged me tightly. You've been the most important constant in my life, even when I didn't appreciate it. I won't make that mistake again. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this point. Elena's betrayal and Damien's crimes had nearly destroyed my family, but they had also revealed truths that might never have emerged otherwise. Victoria now understood the difference between people who claimed to love her and people who actually protected her interests. Elena had learned that manipulation and exclusion carried devastating consequences. And I had discovered that sometimes the only way to save a relationship is to be willing to fight for it, even if that fight causes temporary damage. The man who had attended Victoria's wedding 6 months earlier, wounded, isolated, convinced that his role in his daughter's life was finished, was gone. In his place was someone harder, but also more purposeful. Someone who understood that love without strength was just sentiment, and that protecting family sometimes required destroying those who threatened it. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Thank you for everything, Dad. Sleep well. Love you. I smiled and typed back, love you too, sweetheart. Always. Outside my window, the city sparkled with endless possibilities, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely optimistic about the future. Justice had been served, family bonds had been tested and proven strong, and my daughter was safe. Sometimes that's all a father can ask for.